He was a broke mechanic in a forgotten town, buried in debt in Greece, just trying to survive another quiet day, until a mysterious woman on a roaring black motorcycle rolled into his life. She asked for nothing but directions, and left behind a secret that would rewrite his future forever. What he didn't know, she was worth billions, and she was about to change everything. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now let's jump into the story. The town of Ember Hollow had long since fallen off the map. Time had swept through like a storm, leaving behind empty streets, sun-bleached signs, and buildings that leaned more than they stood. At the edge of this forgotten place sat a tired, little auto garage with a rusted tin roof and a crooked sign that read, Nolan's Fix-It Shop. Inside the shop, Jace Nolan wiped grease from his fingers onto a rag that had seen better days. The air smelled of old oil and hot metal. He leaned over the hood of a 20-year-old truck that hadn't started since last fall. A fan rattled above him, doing little to fight the summer heat. Jace was a quiet man in his early 30s with kind eyes and tired shoulders. He had once dreamed of racing cars and building custom engines. Now he mostly patched up tractors and lawnmowers for folks who paid in trade or IOUs scribbled on the back of receipts. He was behind on rent, behind on payments, and barely had enough to buy dinner that night. But he never turned anyone away. The garage was more than a business. It was his last piece of pride, a place where he felt useful. Even if the town had forgotten him, the machines hadn't. Just as he was locking the door for the day, a sound broke the stillness. A deep, smooth roar echoed down the highway. Jace stepped out and squinted against the sun. A black motorcycle came into view, cutting through the dust like a shadow on fire. It slowed, then rolled to a stop right outside the garage. The rider pulled off her helmet, revealing a woman with sun-touched skin, long dark hair tied back, and eyes that carried a quiet kind of storm. She looked out of place here, like a thundercloud, in a sky that hadn't rained in years. She wore dusty boots, ripped jeans, and a tank top. No fancy gear, no entourage, just a single backpack strapped to the bike. "I'm lost," she said, her voice calm but worn. "No signal, no GPS, can you help?" Jace nodded and reached for an old road map tucked behind the counter. "You're about 2 hours off course," he said, spreading it out on the hood of a car. "Roads are tricky this time of year. Most don't even show up on GPS anymore." She studied the map, then glanced up. "Thanks. I've been riding since dawn." "Want a cold drink?" he asked, already grabbing a bottle from the old fridge. She accepted it with a small nod. "I'm Mira." "Jace," he replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm but not showy. No rings, no polish, just strong fingers and a tired smile. She turned to leave, but as she climbed back onto the bike, it let out a choking sputter and refused to start. Jace walked over and crouched beside it. "Batteries drained. Could be the heat, or maybe just bad luck." Mira frowned. "I'll figure it out." Jace shook his head gently. "Give me 15 minutes. No charge." She looked at him, surprised. "You sure?" He smiled. "I fix things, that's what I do." Mira stepped back and sat on a nearby tire, watching him work. He moved with quiet focus, like someone who had done this 1,000 times but still cared about doing it right. His hands were rough, his shirt stained. But his touch was careful, almost respectful. They didn't talk much at first. The hum of tools filled the space between them. Then as the silence settled, they began to speak. Not deep stuff, not right away. Just little things. Roads she'd ridden. The weather up north. How hard it was to find a decent diner after 9 p.m. But as the minutes passed, the conversation deepened. Mira talked about needing space, about how sometimes life gets so loud you forget what your own voice sounds like. Jace nodded, understanding more than he let on. He told her about the town, the people who left, the dreams he'd shelved to keep this place alive. She studied him as he worked. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Jace chuckled. "Should I?" Mira smiled. Maybe for the first time all day. No, and it's kind of nice. He finished the repair and gave the bike a light tap. Try it now. She hit the starter. The engine rumbled to life. Mira stood, dusted off her jeans, and held out her hand. Thank you, Jace. No problem, he said, shaking it again. No tip? He joked. She raised an eyebrow. I'll remember this. With that, she put her helmet back on and rode off into the evening light, the sun painting the sky gold behind her. Jace watched her disappear down the road, the dust trailing behind like a question left unanswered. He didn't know who she was. He didn't need to. All he knew was that helping her felt right, and sometimes that's more than enough. The roar of Mira's motorcycle had faded into the horizon, but the sound stayed in Jace's ears long after she was gone. That kind of bike wasn't common around Ember Hollow. Too powerful, too polished. It was the kind of machine you only saw in magazines, not on cracked country roads lined with weeds and forgotten dreams. Still, he didn't think too much about it. Jace had more urgent things on his mind, like the water heater in the back that had finally given up, or the envelope with past due bills that had just arrived that morning. But Mira's visit lingered in his thoughts. There was something about her, not just the bike or the silence or the unexpected smile, but something else, something quieter. It was like she carried a weight no one could see. The next day passed slowly. No customers, no calls. Just Jace, a stack of junked parts and the radio playing old country songs through static. Then just before sunset he found something. A silver bracelet tucked behind the tire where Mira had sat. It was simple, thin, smooth, and engraved with a small line of text on the inside. Veil Systems, 1 life, 1 chance. He frowned, turning it in his hand. The name meant nothing to him, but the phrase stuck in his mind. Something told him this wasn't just a lost piece of jewelry. Still, he placed it in the drawer near the register and figured she might come back for it. Far from Ember Hollow, Mira Vale rode through endless highways and forested turns. Her hands gripped the handlebars tightly, not because of the road, but because her thoughts were louder than the engine. She hadn't planned to stop at that garage. She hadn't planned for the bike to fail or for the mechanic to be so genuine. Jace had treated her like anyone else. No guessing, no questions, no pressure. He didn't look past her dusty boots or her tired face. He looked at her, and he didn't know a thing. That's what made it special. Back in the city, Mira was rarely left alone. People wanted interviews, partnerships, praise. She was a known name in the tech world, a young entrepreneur who had built a fortune by building software smarter than the market had ever seen. She'd walked away from it all 3 months ago. Too much noise. Too many people pretending to care. She'd sold her last company for a staggering amount and vanished from the headlines. Now she traveled alone, looking for quiet places, trying to feel something real again. And Jace Nolan, the dusty mechanic, with the kind voice and broken-down shop, had given her 5 of the most peaceful hours she'd had in years. Back in Ember Hollow, Jace cleaned the garage in silence. The bracelet still sat in the drawer, a quiet reminder of a moment that felt bigger than it looked. That night he sat outside the garage on a milk crate, drinking instant coffee and staring at the stars. He thought about Mira, about her soft but firm voice, the way she didn't demand help but still accepted it when offered, the way she said, "I'll remember this." It was such a simple thing to say, but it had stuck with him. There was meaning in those words, a kind of quiet promise. He didn't know her story and he didn't ask. That's not how he worked. People came and went. Some left tools, others left unpaid tabs. Mira had left a feeling he couldn't shake. 3 days passed. No word, no sign of her. Then on the 4th day, Jace walked into town for groceries. While waiting in line, he overheard a conversation between 2 teens scrolling through their phones. "Did you hear about Mira Vale?" one asked. "She's off the grid again. Left everything. People think she's just out riding across the country. Crazy rich and just disappears," the other replied. "Wish I could do that." The name hit Jace like a brick. Mira Vale. His mind flashed to the bracelet. Vale Systems. He paid for his food in a daze, walked the long road back to the garage and opened the drawer. The bracelet was still there, cool and light in his hand. She was that Mira Vale, the tech genius. The woman who made headlines for creating software that ran entire cities, and she'd stood right here in his dusty little shop. No press, no luxury, no hint of who she really was. Just a tired traveler with a broken bike. He should have felt embarrassed for not knowing, maybe even nervous. But instead, he smiled. It made him respect her more. She hadn't wanted special treatment. She hadn't even mentioned her name until he asked. Still, he wondered why someone with the world at her feet would come to a place like this. Then he remembered something Mira had said while sitting on that old tire. Sometimes you just need to remember who you are, without the noise. Jace nodded to himself. That made sense. And though he didn't expect to see her again, part of him hoped he would, because some people leave echoes behind, soft reminders that kindness still matters, and Mira Vale had left more than an echo. She had left a spark. A week passed, and the heat in Ember Hollow stayed heavy. Jace Nolan went back to his usual rhythm. Early mornings, long days, and quiet nights. The bracelet Mira left behind still rested in his drawer, untouched. He didn't know what to do with it. Part of him wanted to keep it safe in case she came back. Another part of him felt strange holding on to something so personal. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a clue to a life much bigger than his. The truth about Mira Vale still sat like a quiet storm in his chest. He hadn't told anyone. Who would believe it anyway? That a billionaire had wandered into his rundown garage, asked for directions, and left behind a piece of her story. So he kept working, fixing engines, changing tires, welding rusty parts back into place. The money was still tight, but somehow his heart felt lighter. He didn't know if it was because of Mira, or just the feeling that maybe he had done something that mattered. Then one morning things changed. Jace was underneath an old Jeep trying to replace a fuel line that refused to cooperate when he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Not the usual rattle of a farm truck or the uneven sputter of an old sedan. This was something smoother, quieter. He rolled out and wiped his hands. A sleek black SUV was parked outside. It looked brand new. The kind of vehicle you don't see in Ember Hollow unless someone's lost. A woman stepped out, not Mira. She wore a gray suit, sunglasses, and carried a leather folder. She walked with the calm confidence of someone used to delivering important news. "Are you Jace Nolan?" she asked. He nodded, instantly cautious. "I'm here on behalf of Mira Vale," she said, removing her sunglasses. "She asked me to deliver this to you personally." She handed him the folder in a small box. Jace opened the folder slowly. Inside was a legal document. He scanned the words. Property transfer agreement. His name. His shop. The land. All signed. Over to him. Free and clear. The box held a single key. A truck key. "I don't understand," Jace said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She asked me to tell you. Thank you for treating me like a person." The woman looked around. The garage, then back at him. "You didn't know who she was. You helped her anyway, no price, no conditions. She doesn't forget things like that." Jace stared at the paper. It didn't feel real. "This can't be right," he said. "There's got to be some mistake." "There's no mistake," she replied gently. "The deed has been filed. The truck is yours too. It's parked just outside town. She said you'd know what to do with it." Jace stepped back, still holding the folder like it might disappear. The woman smiled politely, then left without another word. He stood alone. In the shop, the sounds of the world outside dim compared to the storm inside his chest. The garage, which had once felt like a cage, now felt wide open. He walked to the center of the shop and looked around. The same cracked concrete floors, the same hanging wires and rusted signs. But something had shifted. Mira had kept her promise. She remembered. He sat down, let the moment settle, and finally opened the drawer where the bracelet still waited. He took it out and read the engraving again. One life, one chance. She had meant every word. Jace didn't race off to spend the money or change everything overnight. That wasn't who he was. Instead, he walked to the edge of the shop, leaned against the open garage door, and watched the horizon. The same horizon Mira had ridden toward just a week ago. He thought about how much one moment can change a life. Not with grand speeches or big moves, but with quiet, honest kindness, and how sometimes the people we help aren't the ones who need saving, but the ones who will help us find our way again. The next day, Jace made a small change. He painted a new sign to hang under the old rusted one. It was simple and hand-carved, Echo Garage. Kindness runs deep. He didn't do it for attention or praise. He did it because kindness had echoed back to him in a way he never expected. And now, he wanted to pass that forward, even if no one was watching. The goodbye had been quiet. But the gift? It spoke louder than anything he'd ever heard. The sun rose over Ember Hollow like it always did, slow and soft, painting the sky with dusty gold. But something felt different that morning at Nolan's Fix-It shop. The air carried a quiet sense of change, even if the town around it hadn't yet noticed. Jace Nolan stood outside the garage, sipping weak coffee from his chipped mug. The old place still looked the same. Bent gutters, oil-stained floor, and a bell above the door that never worked quite right. But now it was his, fully and officially his, and parked just a few feet away was the brand-new pickup truck Mira Vale had gifted him. Sleek, reliable, and so shiny it looked out of place next to the rusted tools and dented toolboxes. Jace had barely driven it. He wasn't used to nice things, and part of him still didn't believe it was real. That someone like Mira, someone with more money than he'd ever see in his lifetime, would give so much for so little. But maybe it hadn't been so little after all. That afternoon, a teenager from town named Eli showed up at the garage. He was about 16, tall and skinny, with nervous eyes and a bike that had seen better days. "Are you Jace?" the boy asked, helmet in hand. Jace nodded. "You need help with that?" Eli looked down at the chain, which hung loose like an old shoelace. "Yeah, it broke again. I was trying to ride to school, but I didn't even make it halfway." Jace studied the bike, then looked at the boy. The frustration was clear on his face, the kind Jace recognized from years ago, the feeling of trying and always coming up just short. "Leave it here," Jace said. "Come back tomorrow. I'll fix it." The boy's eyes lit up. "How much?" Jace smiled. "No charge. First repairs on the house." "Really? Really?" The next day, Eli returned to find his bike not only fixed but cleaned and tuned, up like new. Jace had even added a small reflector and fixed the brakes. The teen stood there in disbelief. "Why'd you do all this?" Jace shrugged. "Someone helped me when I wasn't expecting it, just passing it on." From that day on, word slowly spread through Ember Hollow. Not in headlines or big signs, but in whispers, small thank yous, and quiet stories. A single mother had her car fixed without a bill. An old man's pickup was restored after breaking down one last time. A traveling family, lost and out of gas, found help without being asked for their wallet. Jace didn't make a big deal out of it. He just worked like he always had. But now the repairs meant more than just fixing engines. They became part of something larger. Each act of kindness was a ripple from the moment Mira rode into his life. And without ever asking for anything in return, Jace was building something stronger than any engine. He was rebuilding hope in a place that had nearly forgotten what it felt like. One evening, after the garage had closed, Jace sat at his workbench and opened the letter Mira had left with the deed. He hadn't read it until now. It was written in clean, neat handwriting. "Jace, you probably figured out who I am by now. Most people do, eventually. But when I walked into your garage, I wasn't looking for someone to know me. I was looking for someone to see me, and you did. You treated me like any other person who needed help. You listened without asking for anything. That kind of kindness doesn't go unnoticed. I left that garage with more than a fixed bike. I left with a reminder that there are still people who help, just because it's the right thing to do. This garage is yours now. I hope you make it into something more than a business. I hope it becomes a place where people find what I found that day. Thank you, Mira. Jace folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box next to the bracelet she had left behind. He didn't frame it or hang it on the wall. It wasn't for show. It was something to remember when the days got hard, because they still did. Life in Ember Hollow hadn't magically changed. The bills still came. Some days were slower than others. But something had shifted. The garage had become more than a repair shop. It was a place where strangers found help, neighbors found kindness, and people left with more than fixed engines. They left with hope. That was the gift Mira had given him, not just land or tools or money, but a second chance. A chance to do good in a world that often forgets how far a kind gesture can travel. And in return, Jace gave that gift away, one repair at a time. The dust still settled thick on the roads of Ember Hollow, but now it carried something else. Echoes of kindness,